Welcome to Sunday Live, Sunday Evening Live, and we have an extremely interesting guest this evening. But as usual, I have a brief advertisement for the New York Times. They were at it again today or yesterday. It's incredible. They were after the Shrine and the Passion play at Oberammergau in Germany. A very popular, ancient play that is shown every 10 years, changing over the years, brought into line with more ecumenical ideas and things like that. And nearby is a Benedictine abbey where 20 years ago there had been a scandal. 20 years ago. And the New York Times dug that up just the other day. The New York Times used to be a newspaper. At this particular thing, it's an anti-Catholic rag, and it's a history book. It constantly on Sunday talking about things 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They're going to be putting out headlines on the Inquisition or Attila the Hun. If you read the New York Times, borrow it from your neighbors. Don't buy it. And if you see that various rectories or religious houses receive the New York Times, tell them that there are other papers in New York that deserve it. They make me sick. Okay, now, by the way, recently our good friend Ed Koch went after them because they were bringing anti-Semitism as part of the problems of the Catholic Church. And he went after them on that very interestingly. Now, on a much more beautiful, peaceful, joyous subject this evening, a new saint. And in fact, today is the anniversary of the day of her canonization, Saint Gianna Molla. And most of you would know that name. Many of our audience are not Roman Catholics. They're Protestant, Jewish friends, Orthodox friends. So they're not too familiar with Saint Gianna Molla. But interestingly, her son is here this evening, and imagine you're meeting the son of a canonized saint. Most unusual. I hope that doesn't make it sound like you're a relic. and it's very, very important that Pierluigi Molla is with us, and with him is Tom McKenna, who is the really the leader of the Guild of Saint Gianna Molla, and they're both going to tell you a great deal about a most remarkable event, a person, a life in the modern Church of the Catholic Church, modern days of the Catholic Church. Only a couple of weeks ago, we had two physicians on from the St. Gianna Molla Clinic, Dr. Melnick and Dr. Biter. And now we're talking about St. Gianna Molla and her son who is with us. So welcome, Pierluigi, very much.
Thank you very much.
And how is it like to be the son of a canonized saint?
Wow. It's an extraordinary gift because after many years suffering without, because I grew up without a mother, the canonization is the end of this pain, because when you can celebrate when I can celebrate my mother as a saint instead to be sad and celebrate and commemorate her for the death in the death day is a wonderful gift. Experience. A pain is finished and now is a joy.
The pain is finished, but now it's a joy. And so much of this is part of the history of the Church with the martyrs and many saints who have died in fairly recent years. Thomas, now tell us, what are you doing with the Guild?
Well, if you permit, Father, I'd just like to compliment what Pierluigi said, that last year I was traveling with him here in the States and heard him speak several times to different audiences. And something that moved me very much, it was a question similar to what you put, but Pierluigi said, what he said now was that it was sad growing up without the mother, but that as her canonization and as her fame grew, that he and his siblings realized that there was a bigger family now that came into their life, and that their family was much bigger than the walls of their actual family. And I was very moved by that, to see.
And the person responsible for her canonization is?
John Paul II.
John Paul II.
My mother was the last saint proclaimed by John Paul II. The last ceremony he was present was just 16 May of 2004, and she was the last saint. He proclaimed in that occasion 6 saints, and my mother was the last one. And she proclaimed saints, my mother, 10 years after the beatification, definitely, by John Paul II in April 1994. So she was the last saint who went in heaven, thanks to John Paul II. So I think that my mother opened the door of heaven when John Paul II came in.
Well, now we're all waiting for the beatification of John Paul II.
Yeah.
Let's take a look, because many of our audience would not be particularly familiar with the account of the life of Saint Gianna, especially many of our audience are not Catholics. By the way, you can see this beautiful photograph of her on your screen. It says, wife, mother, physician, 1922 to 1962. And that's a beautiful picture. Which one of the children is that in the picture?
It's one of my sisters, Mariolina. She was 1 year younger than me, and she died 2 years after my mother. And she was the first of my 3 sisters, because I have 2 more sisters. I'm the older.
And Father, that picture that you see with the relic below it, the reason that this all came together here was that the organization that I founded 4 years ago, called St. Gianna Physicians Guild, is an outreach for physicians, nurses, and those in the healthcare to provide, you might say, a spiritual inspiration. And we took upon the devotion to St. Gianna because she was a practicing physician. She was a wife and a mother. And this picture that you see here tomorrow will be enshrined. We call it an enshrinement ceremony that a priest or a deacon does. Was written by Archbishop Burke, who's our Episcopal advisor. And it will be enshrined through the ceremony with Archbishop Timothy Dolan presiding at the Gianna Healthcare Center in Manhattan. the same that was by Dr. Melnick and Dr. Bider, who heroically, took upon themselves to establish a center like that. And I think it's even more meaningful at this point because when we saw recently, sadly, that the last Catholic hospital in the city was closing, we see that there's a determination by these two physicians who asked me to come out here, asked to put this together, and it's very admirable. So this picture will be enshrined tomorrow as a patron for those physicians by Archbishop Dolan in their office in downtown Manhattan.
And I may mention that I would love to encourage families, couples, that be needing the assistance of Dr. Bider and Dr. Melnick would take use of the use of the clinic, which is in the how do you call it up on the internet? All that information.
Yes,
would
correct.
be on
They can be found very simply.
Now, a bit of the life. Tell our people who are watching, who are not familiar with this beautiful young woman, about her life.
My mother was born near Milano in 1922 from a family of 13 brothers and sisters. My mother was number 10, and my grandmother was a Terziari Francescani, was really Terziani Francescani, was really great, with great faith, and they help all the brothers and sisters to grow in the faith and to the love for God. She studied she lived in Milano, in Bergamo, in Magenta, and she became a doctor. And in 1949, she had his degrees at the University of Pavia, and then she specialized in pediatrics in University of Milano in 1952. During this period of she was young, she was really active in the Catholic Action, Azione Cattolica, and the St. Vincent Society, doing a lot of work with many other people in Magenta, helping people.
Poor people.
Yes, poor people, all people. And she was really focused on this kind of activity in parallel of her career as a student. When she got his degree as a doctor, she was thinking to go as a missionary in Brazil, where one of his brothers, my aunt Fray Alberto, Capuchin Friar, doctor, was already there, and he built an hospital. And my mother was thinking to go to Brazil, but she found another vocation. She met my father, and she got married in 1955. In the letters, which are beautiful, between my father and my mother, there is all my mother. She wanted to build a real Christian family, and in 1956 I arrived. Then my sister Mariolina. In 1959, my sister Laura. And during the fourth pregnancy, my mother found the second month a large fibroma, which is a benign tumor. She needed a surgery. She asked through the surgery to be careful to evitate any waste to my sister. She was really conscious of the risk because she was a doctor. The surgery went very well, and she goes away for 7 months during the pregnancy, praying, and after 9 months, my sister Gianna Molla was born in 21 of April. Unfortunately, the days after my sister was born, the health of my mother became worse, and for a infection, septicemia, and she died the 28th of April. Before go to the hospital, she said to my father, if you have to choose between me and Gianna, don't hesitate, you have to choose Gianna. Was not only the last gesture of my mother, was a coherence with all the life. She was coherent with her faith, of what she did, she practiced all her life. This is where
it was an assumed decision.
Yes.
We have to interrupt just for a minute for our station identification, but we'll be right back in a minute. I'm sorry, Doctor, to come right at that time. Staff of the studio always have to remind me of what's doing next week. And next week, my very good friend, Father Joseph Koterski, S.J., a Jesuit from Fordham University, professor of philosophy, outstanding. He's been on this program before, and we're going to be looking at some of the very serious problems facing the church and religion in our society. So that's next week, Father Koterski. You were going to say something to us.
Well, I think just to pick up where Pierluigi so beautifully commented on his mother's life, and at the end he highlighted a point that when I founded the Guild and wanted to show Saint Gianna as a model, as an inspiration for people, was, as he said, to focus on her life. Many people know of Saint Gianna simply because of the fact that when she was confronted with a tumor and a pregnancy, that she said, I want you to save the baby. If you have to decide between the two of us, save the baby. That was a very heroic act. But what Pierluigi said, and I agree with, is that was an act at the end of her life that she made because of the heroic virtue that she practiced throughout her entire life. She was not canonized because she was a martyr. That decision was not a decisive factor in her canonization. The Church looked through her writings. She was a woman who gave many lectures to the young girls of Catholic Action. She was someone who preached and defended her faith. Pierluigi's father used to say that her guiding light or compass was the Catholic faith. And if you permit, I'd like to just read the little book we talked about earlier that I wrote with the collaboration of the family, Saint Gianna, a modern-day hero of divine love. It's a very short overview in half an hour. It was written with the intention for physicians, especially, and healthcare workers who don't know about her life. You can read it and understand her life in spirituality. But at the end here, I took little excerpts of her actual writings on the apostolate, on the vocation, on joy, and here, on a doctor's mission. This is quoting from Saint Gianna Molla, and this is really at the core of what I would like with the Guild, and where it's growing with the interest, to bring here, and what I see is very much in the hearts and souls of Dr. Ann Melnick and Dr. Bider in wanting to have a Gianna Center here. She said, this is quoting Saint Gianna Molla, "We physicians have opportunities that a priest does not have, for our mission does not end when medicine is no longer a help. There still remains the soul that must be brought to God. Jesus says, 'Whoever visits the sick is helping me.' This is a priestly mission. Just as the priest can touch Jesus, So we doctors touch Jesus in the bodies of our patients, in the poor, the young, the old, and children. And that's very much what I think is at the inspiration, and is just one example of what St. Gianna's life and spirituality and her conviction was as a Catholic, and which we with the Guild would like to transmit to not to doctors, nurses, and others, and the laity. We have a movement for the laity also to bring St. Gianna's charism to our country.
Well, I certainly hope that our audience is going to look on their internet. What do you call it? I'm unfamiliar with
the World Wide Web.
The World Wide Web, whatever it is. And I do use a pencil sharpener, but that's about it. And get as much as you can, and you can get that information. Is stgiannaphysician.org.
Yes,
it's very easy.
www.stgiannaphysicians.org.
Now, it's interesting, when you read her life, and you stress this, Pierluigi, you're not dealing with dramatic martyrdom and people at the end of the world, and some of the people with their great faith who died in the face of the Second World War, in the face of Hitler, the different saints who were killed in Auschwitz and things like that. You're dealing with something very normal. I remember going to visit the home of Karol Wojtyła as a young man, and he went to his home.
Yeah.
It's a very normal.
It's our home.
It was a flat.
Yes.
There was nothing fancy about it at all, and that's where I believe that his mother had died, and his father was raising his children, and that's what we need to do, to look at holiness in everyday life. And I'm so pleased that in programs like this and some others, we are now looking at quotes, the extraordinarily ordinary.
Yeah.
I think you said that to me.
Yes. My mother, I remember during the ceremony of blessing, the day after, the previous Archbishop of Milano, Carlo Maria Martini, defined my mother the saints of the quotidiana life, la vita, the ordinary life.
The daily life,
the daily life
of every saint.
Which is really correct, because my mother was now is a saint. But when started when the church, the Diocese of Milano, asked the permission to my father to investigate in the life of my mother, to start with the process, he was really surprised, because my father was born in 1920, and his idea of saints was an idea of a person far away from from our time. So completely, I was really surprised. He said, "Yes, I got married with a fabulous, wonderful woman, but he's a saint." He was really surprised. So because my mother was really had an ordinary life, with a deep conviction and faith, with a strong competence in her profession, but he did a life as a mother, as a student, as a mother, as a doctor, up to the end. Convinced up to the end, and up to the end convinced in her because of her conviction. So this was my mother, a mother who liked to go with us skiing, climbing mountains, driving the car, going to her patient. So a mom as many other moms. This was my mother.
Father, something that I've been honored and thankful to know the family personally for many years, and Pierluigi and I've learned a lot about their saintly mother, And a question, I always, when I'm with them, I try to ask questions to learn more about her, because it's also from St. Gianna's brother and sister that are still living. But someone asked a question that I had never thought of when we were traveling together last year. Someone in the audience put the question, Pierluigi, did your mother ever spank you? And I thought to myself, what is he going to say? I didn't know. And do you remember your response there? He said, he said, of course she did. I was a rascal boy like anyone else. So that's the reality of a saint. And I think the fact that we have so many photographs, video footage, we have
her gloves.
We have her gloves with us.
We have a lot of picture, wonderful picture. This is one instrument of our doctor.
We should show that on our.
But this is St. Gianna's stethoscope that she used in the care of her of the patients that she had. It's an old-fashioned type, but this was actually used by St. Gianna.
Now, here's I'm going to throw you something. As I was listening to this, I went back in my mind 66 years. And my aunt died in her 4th birth of her child. Her husband was a physician, and she had always cesareans, and she died in delivery, and the little child died as well. I was 12 years old. I was shaken to the ground. And I remember her name was Mary. And I remember my mother telling me that day that she had died. And my mother said, Mary was a saint. She was a very kind, very deeply believing girl from St. John, Newfoundland. She came down with the strong Irish faith of that part of the world. And I was convinced from that day to this that indeed she was a saint. And I often prayed to her. So St. Gianna is an image for many people like this.
John Paul II, during the canonization, said St. Gianna is, as many other mothers, who dedicate themselves to her children, who spend all their life for the children. So she is a symbol for many other mothers. This is the story of St. Gianna.
It's beautiful to see the inspiration of mothers. In fact, as a result of it, we have the enshrinement program that we do this enshrinement in doctor's office, and we now, Archbishop Burke, we worked and we rewrote it, and we have a version now for home enshrinements, a campaign we hope by next month to launch.
No, we'd explain that, Doctor.
Well, it's a home, again, St. Gianna, we're presenting her as a model, somebody that you can read about her life. You can actually, if you watch the video, there's live footage, home video of St. Gianna, color pictures. I mean, this picture was very touching when I saw this picture, a color picture of a saint with the children. It's very moving. This is not someone we just hear about, but we actually see pictures. And we had a request from many, many mothers and others who have suffering the trial of having children that are going awry or that are straying, or all that we know, confronting this culture of death and this culture of corruption. So I spoke to Archbishop Burke, and we readapted it, and we have an enshrinement program that we will send out with a photograph of St. Gianna, the book, the video. Do we make a shrine in your house of St. Gianna that you can occasion to teach your children, to talk to other mothers, and present her as someone that understands you and to reach out to you and that they can confide in and pray to. Because the definition of a saint is a person who practiced virtue to a heroic degree. She's our hero. For mothers, those that are suffering and understanding what she went through, I think she's a wonderful example of virtue for them to imitate and to know about.
You know, it's a beautiful thing. I should do this on this broadcast in the near future. What is a saint. We have many Protestant and Jewish friends watching our programs, often telling me, and this is something that's somewhat mysterious to them. It's interesting. It is not unusual for Jewish friends to pray to Catholic saints. I don't know why, but nevertheless, you know, that's not unusual. So we're going to look here at a saint who is an ordinary person.
Definitely, yes.
With extraordinary virtue. And perhaps that's what makes most of the saints precisely that. Now we're going to be coming back, and we need not just questions, but we want you to call up, say something. Don't just sit there like a bump on a log. And we'd like to have you call in to our two guests and say something to us, and we'll make this part of a real dialogue. We'll be back in 2 minutes. For those who are from New York, tomorrow evening is there a special Mass in St. Gianna at the Church of St. Catherine of Siena, the Dominican church on 68th Street and right off First Avenue, right over near the New York Hospital. And a beautiful church. And it would be very nice to get a nice turnout there. We have a call now from Loretta. Loretta, what's your question and where are you from?
Yes, Father. I'm from Monroe, North Carolina, and it's a blessing to be able to speak to you, Father. I was hoping that you could get maybe one of your guests or both maybe to touch on the miracles that occurred to ensure St. Gianna's canonization. It's just rare, you know, to have a modern-day saint like this, and I'm just very interested, and I'd like to maybe if they could touch on that, I'd be pleased. Thank you.
That's excellent, Loretta. That's very good.
The two miracles. The first one for the blessing, the second one for the canonization, took place both in Brazil. The first one was a woman with a cancer. After she prayed my mother, she was completely healed, and there was no scientific explanation of how the illness could happen. The second, this was the miracle for the blessing. The second one for the canonization was for a mother she was pregnant of a fourth child, and the second month she has serious problem, and the advice of the doctor was to interrupt the pregnancy. She decided to go ahead. She knew the story of my mother. The girl was born. It's called Gianna, and he's 6 years old now. So also in this case, there was no medical explanation of how it could happen.
Well, and those are two very appropriate.
Very appropriate. Very appropriate not only for the mother and also of the place, because my mother, as I said before, before got married with my father, she was thinking to go to Brazil to work as a doctor. So she did the same. So
we have now a call from Margaret. Margaret, where are you from, and what are you going to tell us?
I'm from Colorado, and I was just wondering if her brother helped raise this girl, or who helped, and how old she is now. Does she have a family? Because my mother died when I was just 3. There was 9 of us. My sister was only 16, the oldest, and that's the only two that's left. The oldest and youngest, all in between, are gone. I was just wondering how this little baby was, how she was brought up.
How was Gianna raised? Did you help? How did your father?
Yes, but my sister grew up with we help in my father. My father was grew up us with a lot of with a double love, if it's possible. He passed away 1 month ago at the age of 98. Oh. He was our guide for all this year. You can imagine that my father lived 19 years. The story with my mother was only 6 years, because they knew each other in 1955, 54. My mother died at the beginning of 62. So in this 6 years, there was a story so great that it was really impressive, the consequence that he had.
They only knew each other for 6 years?
6 years. They knew, they got married, and my mother died when I was 5 years old. So this is a story.
One of the sister, Pierluigi's aunt, St. Gianna's sister, who is a religious sister and also a doctor, she was a medical missionary, tells that it was very fortuitous that by chance, unbeknownst back when people still traveled by ship, her sister came back from the mission in India, where she spent a lot of her life, and she arrived right the week that St. Gianna had fallen ill, just by chance, and she spent the week at her bedside, caring for her in her agony. And she says that the great suffering, St. Gianna was suffered septic peritonitis, so there was a physical suffering and nausea, everything that goes with that. But she said the real suffering of Gianna, that she turned to God and offered it up, was the anguish of a mother knowing she was going to die, because she was a physician, she knew very clearly, and she was leaving behind a husband and 4 small children. And she saw that, but she accepted it as God's will. And I think that was something that is a very moving story, and it's something for mothers to take to heart. Here's a woman who suffered. I don't know if there'd be anyone who could say they suffered something equal to that.
That's impressive. And whenever anyone hears of children losing their mother or losing their father, it breaks your heart. And before I was doing the kind of work I do now, I worked at Children's Village, where I was there today, and you meet a number of children there who lost their parents, and it breaks your heart for them. We have a call from Joe. Joe, where are you from, and what are you going to tell us?
Hi, Father Benedict. I'm Joe from New York. I have a
not really.
My
Joe.
family has a my family has a great relation with Saint Gianna. One of your priests, Father Conrad, when my wife was pregnant in 2001 with our daughter Gianna, who we happened to name after Saint Gianna, we were given the worst news you could possibly receive. She was our 7th child, and my wife had gone for a sonogram, and then they followed up with another one. And they called us in, and they told us she wasn't growing normally. Mentally, she would have severe mental retardation, like the whole thing. And then they set it up for the abortion, for us to have an abortion, because my wife was 22 weeks pregnant. And they said, you need to react quickly, because at 24 weeks you'd have to go out to Kansas. And the doctor, I'll never forget it, brought in a thing of tissues for us, and I said to him, really, we don't need the tissues, because Father Conrad had always, preached to us, always trusting the divine providence of God. And we had, St. Gianna. We were introduced to St. Gianna. Well, anyway, I guess through some contacts, Father Conrad was able to get us a relic through Joe Cunningham in Philadelphia, and we had a second-class relic of the wedding dress that my wife had throughout the whole pregnancy and for a couple of months after Gianna was born. And not only did she survive the womb, but it turns out that the one doctor that was supposed to deliver my daughter that night got called out on business, and it turns out the doctor, this female doctor who did the birth, her husband's brother is a Roman Catholic priest. Immediately after they delivered my daughter, she called up her husband from the maternity when I was right there and said, call your husband and put this child, this is her name, and enroll her in perpetual prayer for life. And she's named after, Blessed Gianna Molla. And so anyway, my daughter went through 2 open heart surgeries in the first 2 weeks of life. Father Conrad did the baptism in her at the neonatal intensive care unit at Columbia. And just recently, this past February, she had her 3rd open heart surgery. And my daughter, every year she celebrates a birthday, is a great gift. And I really, owe it to the divine providence of God, but through St. Gianna. And I pray for Pierluigi every day, and Laura and Gianna Emanuel, because you're so special to us, because, a life is a life no matter what. And my wife always look at this little child, and we say, you know what? She has endured a lot of suffering, but there must be so many of my Giannas who have been aborted over these years that just bring such a joy and such a smile to our face. It's just amazing.
You've given a great witness to us tonight, Joe. That's marvelous. And you have a nice New York accent.
Yeah.
Now, we need some other people calling in from our audience. How about somebody here in the studio audience? Here we go, right there. And we need your name and the question.
My name is Marilyn Bruno. Buonasera.
Buonasera.
Over the past couple of weeks, EWTN has been showing a wonderful movie about the Italian saint, Dr. Giuseppe Moscati. And I was wondering, as your mother was growing up, did she and her family know about him?
Yes. Giuseppe Moscati.
Yeah, did your mother know about him?
Yes.
What about Dr. Moscati? I don't know about him.
He was an Italian physician also, who was a saint. He was. Your question was, did Saint Gianna know him? No.
She was 5 years old when he died, and I was wondering if she and her family already knew about him in those days.
My father, yes. My mother, really, I don't know if she knows.
We have a call now from Jean. Jean, where are you from, and what are you going to tell us?
Hi, Father Groeschel. I'm from Floral Park, New York, and my mother had a stillborn child full term after me. So, I guess we can relate to that because she always remembers the birthday. My question, though, is, Father, is there a church named after Gianna Molla anywhere?
It's the church. Here in States, there are 2 parishes named as my mother. One is in St. Louis, close to St. Louis, Missouri. Another one was just last week. I was here in New Jersey, Northfield, because there was a merger of 2 parishes, and now there is a new parish named Northfield, named close to Atlantic City, and is named Gianna Molla. There are other Gianna house, which are house for helping maternity. I've been just this week in North Dakota, in Warsaw, North Dakota, which is north of North Dakota. It's a Gianna house established in 2004. And since then, in the house, more than 50 babies were born instead of abortion. All with mothers, with young mothers, with mostly with violence, and it's really a concrete way to honor the memory of my mother.
I should tell you that our Good Counsel Homes, Chris Bell and I started this out years ago, and now we have maybe 60 mothers and babies, many of them without any home to rely on, and we're especially devoted to St. Gianna Molla. Oh, yes.
There is another one in Vancouver. There is one in Minneapolis. There is I was really surprised. I mean, here since 1 week, once a year I come in States. Here in U.S. there is a new generation of Gianna baby, because there are a lot of young baby named as my mother with the Italian name, not the American one. So Gianna, and it's really amazing.
Father, I think it's worth noting very much so that one of the greatest interventions that we see with St. Gianna, and for me was really confirmed when I was over last year and I was speaking with St. Gianna's brother, Father Giuseppe, Pierluigi's uncle, and I asked him, we were having dinner, and I asked him, what miracles do you hear the most about? Interventions, you get letters, because the family is already receiving letters and emails related to the mother. And we had not spoken about this before, but he brought up, he said, by far, there's no question about it, the number of infertile couples that have been able to conceive children is immense. And that was very confirming, because that is the biggest phenomenon here in the United States. And many of these babies that are born is because couples that could not have children even for many, many years, the stories are just amazing, to such a point that I know some bishops, Archbishop Burke I know, when he was in La Crosse and later when he went to St. Louis, had an annual mass for Gianna babies, of couples that had babies and multiple.
Name Gianna.
And they named them Gianna. And that's something that the mass that we're having tomorrow is to honor St. Gianna, but especially for couples and infertile couples. And that was through the idea that when I discussed these situations with Dr. Melnick, she said, well, that's what we should do. It fits very much with their practice, because their outreach is using something called NAPRO technology that can help couples in a Catholic way who can't conceive many times to be able to have children. And St. Gianna, therefore, is a great patron for that.
And as you mentioned, Archbishop Burke has been very much in the forefront. He's now in Rome, but he's going to be on this program during the summer. He's already promised me that he will do that. We have a call from Denise. Denise, where are you from, and what are you going to tell us? Hi.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Denise, and my husband Joe and I live in Shrub Oak. We're quite familiar with you. We see you from time to time in Westchester County. We also help out at the Good Counsel homes. We take collections for them. The reason I'm calling tonight is I have a granddaughter, Jessica, who made her confirmation a few years ago, and at the time she did a lot of research about what name she wanted to select, and I was proud of her for that, and she eventually came upon St. Gianna. She did so much research, and she found her to be her most favorite saint. And Jessica today has turned into be a most beautiful young lady and very religious, and she also helps us take collections to the Good Counsel home, and it's such a pleasure to see St. Gianna's son sitting here knowing that my granddaughter had picked his mom's name. And I just want to say congratulations, and I'm so proud of all you've done also, Doctor.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Have we got a question from our studio audience? Our sister is one of our postulants of the Sisters of Life. Sister, tell us your name.
Hi, my name's Mariana, and my question, Pierluigi, I was wondering if you have any memories of your mother from your childhood.
I was 5 years old when she passed away, so I have some short memory, as I think all of you have a memory before 5 years old. So I have a memory when I used to go with her on her car. She used to travel visiting patients because we lived outside Milano in a small village. So his car is a Fiat 600, was a small Fiat, to go to visit her parents. I have other memories when we used to ski together, because she taught me how to ski. I have memories when we were with my sister. I have memory when picchiare a bit with
spank
you. Because I was
a rascal.
Definitely, yes. So really simple example of a way of life of an ordinary man. What I remember is that his voice. She was really always so not strong, but decisive, with no possibility of contradiction. So that's it.
Now here's an interesting observation. You know that someone very famous had not been noticed in their little town as an extraordinary person, and that's Jesus Christ. When he began to preach, which he was about 30 years old, he began preaching, and they said, where did he learn these things? You know, was he not the son of Joseph the carpenter? And our divine Savior quietly was not prepared to go out on his divine mission, and so he was there quietly in Nazareth. And isn't that much to learn? Isn't that a very much thing? And over my life, I've known 2 or 3 people who are likely to be canonized. One of them, Mother Teresa. They came to be very popular and well known, but for many years they were precisely like that. Now, we're getting only 2 minutes more, and I'm going to ask the question. All right? You grew up with a saint. Well, you as
your mother.
Your mother.
Saint of.
And after she passed away, her name, her memory was there in the family.
The memory of my mother never disappeared from was always present because of my father. Because of my father, because she often every day talk on her. She really lived a long life in love with her.
I'm going to have to interrupt.
Sorry.
Because unfortunately we're closing out. It's been an interesting talk this evening. I've been fascinated. I'm sorry we're over time. May Almighty God bless each and every one of us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. And thank you very, very much. I'm sure our audience has been extremely grateful. As usual, I have to ask you to keep EWTN on the air raids, on the air. Please keep the checks into my dear Mother Angelica, and we're doing all right, but we're relying on you, and we have a tremendous expense to keeping a whole network going. So help us along.